For the last 10 years, I've been traveling for work, holidays, and everything in between. And a constant question that's always come up for me is, what is the best camera setup for me to take on this trip? Well, after all this time, and having just been on a trip last week, I can say that I think I finally found the sweet spot. So let me show you. So I've just come back from a trip to Sri Lanka, which is a country that I love going to. I've been there at least 15 times already, often to film teams who are volunteering for organizations there. This week, when I was there, I was with another team who were volunteering. My job wasn't actually to film this week, I was more running the team. But of course, I wanted to bring a camera with me. This was the setup that I decided to bring, a Sony ZV E1 with a Zeiss Loxia 35mm f2 lens. Might seem like a bit of a random setup, but this really was the sweet spot for me in quite a number of ways, which I'm going to break down for you now. So the first big advantage of this camera setup is a really important one, and it's this, that this isn't my main camera. This isn't my main workhorse, the camera that my career depends on. That's the camera that's filming right now. This is my B cam, and don't get me wrong, it's a really good camera. It's almost identical to what I'm filming on right now in so many ways. But the fact that this was a B cam unlocked something really, really important for me on this trip. And that was the knowledge that if I broke it, if I lost it, if something happened to it, my company, career, blah, 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 wasn't going to go down the drain because of that. And I think having that peace of mind, it almost makes you willing to bring a piece of gear out in more situations than you normally would if a lot more was dependent on it. Most of the features which sets apart a main camera like an A7S III or an FX3 or something, they're not actually features that you really need on a camera for a trip like this. The difference between this camera and the camera I'm filming on really comes down to a lot of the practical sides of it. For instance, having a full-size HDMI port, having dual card slots on the main one, having a viewfinder, which would have been nice, but it wasn't essential. Stripping down this camera and bringing only what you need and missing out the other stuff lets the cost of this one be a lot lower, and really importantly, lets the size of this camera be a lot smaller, which is actually one of the key things that made this camera so useful on this trip. Now, the lens choice that I made is kind of a funny one. I chose this 35mm Loxia. It's a lens that I only just bought about 6 weeks ago. It's fully manual, it's really heavy. It's smaller than most lenses. It's actually the lens that they used in Top Gun, the new Top Gun film. This is the main shot in the jet that's staring at Tom Cruise and all those other beautiful people's faces. So it's a fully manual lens, but it is really nice. It's like, yeah, literally cinema glass quality. But the reason I chose this as my main lens to come on here, I did bring some others, was I love the 35mm focal length. I own a Fujifilm X100, and for stills, that just comes with me everywhere. That's a 35mm equivalent. I love it, and I wanted to see if I stuck a small 35mm on my video camera, would it stay on the body the entire time, or would I end up swapping it out for a zoom? And I can tell you, this was on my camera 95% of the time. I used a 100mm lens on 2 occasions on the trip that I brought with me because I just wanted to. It was a cool vintage Nikon 100mm that my dad gave me. It's from the 1950s. But it did mean I had to break one of my rules, which I've always kept, which now I might break more regularly, which is always travel with a zoom lens. Honestly, no regrets, and I can say I probably will not be bringing that zoom lens with me a lot now, at least when it comes to fun trips. Work trips, I probably will always bring it. Or like filming trips, I will always bring it. Another advantage of this camera being my B camera and also being really small was that I was able to leave it in a ready-to-go state for the entire trip. And by this, I mean the ND filter was already on. It meant I could pull the camera out within 5 seconds, be filming and ready to go. Perfect for capturing spontaneous moments, unplanned things, exciting stuff. And the way I stored it was I kept it in the bottom of my backpack in a little sort of camera cube, but I could literally just grab it, and it had a little lid on it so I could put anything above it. We were in a messy environment. You'll see from this footage playing that paint is flying around, polish is flying around, dust is flying around. It's not exactly a clean, clinical environment, but it didn't matter. I could keep it clean enough and safe enough. Always kept a cloth nearby to wipe the ND filter if I needed. Worst comes to worst, just use the bottom of my shirt, a non-painty bit. If it wasn't in the bottom of my backpack, it was in a long weekend little shoulder satchel type thing that Paige bought me a while ago, which I used for my Fuji, but a camera of this sort of size, I can actually fit it in there. So when we were out and about, I carried it in that, and yeah, it was just always ready to go. People talk about these phrases like the best camera you own is the camera you have on you, or the worst photo you take is the photo you didn't take. And kind of going off of those principles, always being ready to shoot and having something with you means you stand such a higher chance of getting great footage and capturing great moments that you wouldn't be ready to do. Oh! And this B cam was what let me do that. This is also the first time I've done a trip where I shot 100% manual focus, and that's a bit of a new thing for me, and I really enjoyed it. I think from a visual point of view, I've begun to enjoy in the last year or so how nice, blurry, out of focus parts of an image look. And where traditionally all the bokeh monsters out there are just wanting to go as shallow as possible, focus on someone and have the background out of focus, being in constant control of where the focus was meant I was judging each situation by eye, going, oh, foreground out of focus, background out of focus, blah, 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 moving it around and just taking back a bit of control of an area that, to be honest, I've left in the hands of the computer for too long and I don't want to do now. Autofocus is still obviously brilliant. Right now, I can see a little white box around my face on this camera because I want autofocus for a situation like this. But to do what I just did in Sri Lanka for the last week, really didn't need it and really didn't miss it. So to conclude this little nerd festival of why this camera was the perfect setup for me and why I'll probably keep doing it, this is a B cam in my eyes, but in terms of quality, it's by far an A cam. This whole setup was less than £2,000, which is translated into whatever currencies. The lens is top notch, used in flipping Top Gun, so you know it's really good. The camera body is the same sensor as an FX6, FX3, which is half of Netflix productions. Being able to shoot video in a time period like this is magic. The capability of what the cameras can do and the ability in post to be able to fix things that you couldn't take care of in the moment with S-Log3 is really incredible. Maybe with AI come in, maybe this is the sweet spot right now before all of our jobs get taken by robots again. But for me, my priority on this trip wasn't shooting a video. My priority was to look after our team, engage in the work that we were doing there, and if I could record something cool off the back of it, that was a bonus. And I think that probably is what sums up why this camera was so good for it. Even if you're going on holiday, your priority should never be to film and make that your goal of what you're doing. The camera should always serve you, serve the trip that you're on. Now, if it was a specific filming job I was on, obviously I would take a better setup. Obviously I would look after it more and I wouldn't be reckless. But when it comes to travel setups and doing things, you don't want to be overthinking that kind of stuff. You want to have it easy enough to bring with you everywhere and not ruin your day or take over your day. And I can honestly say this camera and looking after it never got in the way of what I needed to do, yet it was still good enough to capture something that I'm truly proud of. And yeah, honestly, I'm really excited to keep taking this setup with me on the go and seeing what else I can capture. Last year I took my Fuji with me almost everywhere just to be able to take photos. This year I want to bring this and try video stuff. So those are my thoughts on this camera. I'd love to know what you think, or maybe what your top camera for travel setup is. Thanks for watching, and please check out the other videos on this channel. Bye.